Welcome to the Ohio Eviction Playbook.
Hey everyone, welcome back to an all-new episode of the Ohio Eviction Playbook with Ed Kasputis. I am your host, Mike Leon. Ed here is a longtime Ohio attorney, a former state legislator as well, and the founder of Kasputis Law Firm. He approaches evictions through both a legal and business lens, and he's been helping landlords and investors avoid costly mistakes along the way. Today's episode, we're going to continue our discussion from the previous episode of common legal defenses that can defeat an eviction action in the state of Ohio. Ed, it's good to see you as always. So let's talk a little bit about month-to-month tenants out there. So beginning with a renewal of month-to-month tenancy, like how does a landlord's acceptance of a partial payment for monthly rent, how does that renew the tenancy even if the payment is made after the due date?
Well, thank you for having me on, Mike. A month-to-month tenancy is kind of like the default tenancy if you don't have a written agreement. Once you make a partial payment, you can't evict them for that partial payment. The bottom line is if you want to end a month-to-month tenancy, you should send a letter in writing giving them at least 30 days notice that you're ending the tenancy and then stick by it. Because what will happen is you hear a sob story, you say, okay, you can stay an extra month, but it's like, wait a minute. By listening to the sob story, you just ripped up your old 30-day. What does that mean? You got to start over. So they bought themselves another 30, 45 days of life. Do you really want to give them 30 or 45 days? No, my daughter's going to move in. Well, tell your daughter she's staying at the Residence Inn for a while. You just made a mistake. And those are the kind of times when you're a landlord, when in doubt, call my office. Yeah. And we'll walk you through it so you don't make a biblical mistake and go, oh, I have just really ruined my timing.
Yeah, it's great advice. Call an attorney. But let me ask you on that line.
No, call me.
Yeah, call you, right, exactly. So when does a timely and full tender of rent, when does that operate as a defense to the eviction for non-payment? And can a landlord lawfully refuse the payment?
No. Landlord cannot lawfully refuse it, but in my experience, there's been landlords who they get mad at a tenant and they just say, no, I'm not accepting your rent. So then you go to court, in a perfect world, you have your rent money and you go, Your Honor, I went to pay him on the 1st and he just said, no, I want you to move. Well, that's not a legal way for a landlord to try to end a relationship.
And something I know you love talking about is Cleveland. And let's discuss Cleveland's pay to stay statute. First off, explain what that is for the audience with respect to eviction actions. And what rights does a tenant have at that stage? What must a landlord do if all the past due rent and reasonable late fees are tendered?
Cleveland enacted, and like Akron has enacted it, and I think Euclid has it too, a pay-to-stay statute. Under the old law or the common law, the bottom line was if you paid late, the landlord had the decision, do they want to keep you if you come with money or to say, oh, no, I'm still ending my relationship. Cleveland City Council enacted something, I think, in 2020, and they updated it in 2022. And the bottom line is this. If you owe the landlord money and you can tender that before he files a lawsuit, he shouldn't file the lawsuit. And if he does, you can go into court to say, I tried to pay him. He wouldn't take the money. Thank God I still have the money and I want to pay him. So you can use it as an affirmative defense. If he files the lawsuit, then the pay to stay statute also says you need to pay him what you owe him plus the filing fee, not attorney's fees, but the court filing fee. And, a lot of times the problem is I've seen tenants where it's like, I had the money 10 days ago. What happened? My car broke down. Well, you don't have it now. If you could pay it right now, that's your defense, but you can't, you're getting evicted. So if I'm a landlord and I really want someone out, let's wait till court and we'll see if we can cut the deal. And 8 times out of 10, they just don't have the money that they say they had 2 weeks ago.
Ed, can you explain for the audience the Vein Act principle and how can a landlord's conduct excuse maybe a tenant's obligation to tender rent?
Well, the law never requires the doing of a worthless act. There was one case in Southern Ohio where rent was due on the 1st, but the written lease said you had a grace period to the 5th. So for like 5 months in a row, the tenant kept trying to pay like on the 3rd, and the landlord's like, no, you're supposed to pay on the 1st. And it's like, no, read your lease. I had till the 5th. So they go to court, and the landlord's like, well, he didn't try to pay for this month also. And the judge is like, well, yeah, because every month you told him you wouldn't take it. You have to give him a reasonable opportunity. And so that was an excuse for noncompliance. Another example is you got a water leak at your place. The landlord comes, he's looking around. It's like, oh, geez, I got to fix this here. Don't pay me rent till I fix it. Then 3 days later, the landlord files an eviction action against you. And when you're in court, you testify. And it's like, I got the money. He told me not to pay him. He was going to get it fixed because he was apologizing that everything was getting wet that I owned. So that's why you got to have a human judge sometimes to hear both sides of the story and weigh the credibility of the parties.
Ed, in your experience, have you seen where a landlord has given specific instructions to a tenant regarding rent payments, but it's excused the tenant's obligation to tender the rent?
I fight with a lot of landlords. I call it the lazy payment method. They're in California and they tell their tenants, go to my Chase Bank account and put money in it. And because of that, let's say you're doing an eviction action, they can say, look, I made a partial payment. I gave the guy $500 this morning. So I always caution the landlords, you have to have better control. I like if they have to mail it to you and all that. I don't like this Venmo and all that. Now, if you're a tenant and you're going into court and it's non-payment, you better bring your canceled checks or proof of payment. And here's another thing, especially in the city of Cleveland. If you pay by cash, they require the landlord, you must, as a landlord, give a written receipt.
Ed, in the situations where rent is to be collected at the premises, right? Not the bank example you just gave. Like, how can the landlord's failure to make a timely demand at the required time, does that operate as a defense to the eviction for non-payment?
Yeah, because here's what will happen. Let's say you have a lease and the lease doesn't say how rent will be paid. Well, then the common law assumption is it is the duty of the landlord to go to the rental property and collect the rent. That's what they did 150 years ago. That's what you should do today. Or let's say you have a lease that says that the landlord will collect the rent on the 3rd of the month. The landlord doesn't come on the 3rd of the month. The landlord comes on the 4th of the month at 10 a.m. You're at work. And then the landlord goes, you didn't pay me. And it's like, wait a minute. If you come after work, I'm home. I would pay you. But you wrote the contract. You said you'd pick it up the 3rd of the month after 5 p.m. So that can work against the landlord. And the court will say, accept the money. He has not breached anything. You breached your duty to go to the rental unit and pick up the rent.
Ed, when there is an eviction action that's been dismissed, or let's say the judgment has been entered in favor of the tenant, what obligation then does the landlord have to provide an opportunity to pay the rent that accrued during that prior eviction action?
Typically, Ohio courts give you 6 to 7 days. So if I'm a landlord and I lose my case, let's say my 3-day notice was defective, then the courts don't want me serving a 3-day notice 10 minutes after I lose the case. Give the tenants a reasonable time to pay you. And typically 6 or 7 days, most courts in Ohio have said, is a reasonable time to pay.
Ed, as we kind of wrap on this episode, how does accord and satisfaction kind of operate? When a tenant, they tender a lesser amount in that full settlement of a claimed debt, like we were talking about, and the landlord accepts or retains that payment. How does that jive?
Well, in honor of President Trump, it's the art of the deal. And there are times when a tenant says, I know I owe you $2,000. I'm getting a tax return of $1,700. I either need that $1,700 to move, to start a new life, or I'll give it to you in full satisfaction of the $21,000 or $2,000 that I owe you. Will you take it? Then the landlord, as a businessman, can say, I would like to buy my wife that sofa that I promised her. I'll take it. Right. So that's called accord and satisfaction. In a perfect world, if you got lawyers on both sides, you'll have a mutual release. But if you don't, then the court will look at the conduct and say, well, you did pay him $1,700. Did you pay him only because he promised he would take that in full satisfaction at $2,100? Yeah. And then the landlord goes, no. Then the court goes, oh, I got to weigh the credibility of the witnesses. who do I think is telling the truth?
Right. And this is why you got to contact an attorney. I know when I'm talking to one right now. Ed, thanks again for the time, the insights. I appreciate it as always.
Thank you, Mike.
And that's it for today's episode of the Ohio Eviction Playbook. If you want to learn more, you want to connect with Ed and the team over at Kasputis Law, do me a favor right now. Visit KaspudisLaw.com today. And one more favor, as always, before you head out the door, hit like, hit subscribe, leave a review, comment, share the episode with someone who needs to hear it. I'm Mike Leon. We'll see everybody next time.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.